Hello all. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the whens, whys, and hows of multisensory learning for children diagnosed with CVI. My name is Susan Sullivan, and I am the clinical lead for the Easter Seals of Central Illinois ALEX program for cerebral visual impairment. And we're very happy that you could join us. Tonight, we do not have the availability for questions at the end, but if you do have any questions, if you'd like to enter them in the chat room, that would be great. And we can send out an email with some answers within the next couple of days. Okay, so multisensory learning is for all children. Memory research shows that multisensory exposure can result in superior recognition of objects. And this builds the understanding of concepts, which is true for all children. Utilizing all of the senses provides a well-rounded understanding of the concepts. So holding an object provides a deeper understanding. You think about the weight of the object. Is it heavy or light? You think of, is it smooth or textured? And you think about how it feels from every perspective, like on the top, the bottom, the sides. It all feels a little bit different, which adds to the learning about that object. Smell. Oops. Okay, so smell assists in orientation by such a way as going by the cafeteria at school, walking past the bakery in your neighborhood. It makes you aware of where you're at, or even finding the kitchen in your own home. It can trigger memories, can be associated with a grandma baking cookies or recognizing grandpa's cologne, and those bring up memories of the child of pleasant experiences, or it could actually be something that is a negative experience. It elicits anticipation by being aware of the smell of, say, onions frying in the kitchen and knowing that it's going to soon be time to eat. Hearing provides a deep understanding by assisting in orientation. So if a student is going by the copy machine, he can hear it playing, and then he knows that he's walking past the office. It can alleviate some fears. I know a lot of kids with visual impairments are startled by loud noises. And if they know and understand what it is that's making that noise and what the purpose of it is, that can help them in not being afraid of it. I know the vacuum cleaner is one that comes to mind when I think of that. If you would explain to the child and even let them see it, touch it, hold it, turn it on themselves, that can really help with taking some of that fear away. Can assist in recognition, of people through their voices, of course. And then also some kids actually say that they can recognize people by the way that they walk, or if they're wearing a certain pair of shoes. And it provides vocabulary input. We learn so much by what we are hearing, and we need to be cognizant of that. I do like to always alert and remind that kids with cerebral visual impairment, their visual processing is slow, and that also adds to the possibility that their auditory processing may be slow too. So when you're speaking, it's very helpful to slow down your speech, and also to maybe use some different intonations. I know that when folks are working with kids with with hearing loss, they sometimes will say things in different ways so that they can make sure that the child's hearing it. So if you're saying the word people or people, and put the emphasis on different parts of the word and expand different parts of the word, that kind of make it sound different and gives the kids different ways of hearing that, because not everybody's voice sounds the same. Okay, when you think about taste, you can talk about the concepts of is food hot or is it cold? Are things sweet or are they sour? This also helps trigger memories of maybe something that was very positive that they liked the taste of, or something that maybe not necessarily so much, which is the case for many kids. It can also help to alert or to calm. So there's a picture of lemons there. So right away that kind of gives me that sour taste in my mouth, and that seems to alert you. But there are also calming tastes that kind of bring a calming sense, some cinnamon and things like that. And then movement, we talk about the kinesthetic sense. And so that is another way for all kids to learn about going fast or going slow, going up, down, stopping. And we can use that sense of movement to describe where kids are going, so they can anticipate bumps or turns when they're moving through their environment. And it kind of will give them more information so that they can have more control of their environment. So this data that we're gathering as we use these multisensory skills, we can intermix with activities, and this is foundational for information for the child's learning media assessment. And I always want to remind folks to make sure that you are doing a learning media assessment for kids with CVI. What it is an objective process of systematically selecting learning and literacy media for students with visual impairments. And you're basically collecting all types of information, how a student learns about things. Sometimes he's more apt to listen. Sometimes he's more apt to reach out and feel for something. Sometimes he is apt more to look with his eyes and use that vision. So I just kind of wanted to take that idea and consider some multisensory strategies when teaching the concept of letters. I know that with kids with CVI, we typically think of print, and so we can get kids to maybe look at a letter. I know we talk a lot about single presentation of letters, or determining how many things a child can see at the same time. If you have multiple things on the screen, you may want to take several of them off and start with maybe the first letter of the child's name, or something that's highly interesting to that child, a favorite toy or something with that letter. And to, yes, definitely let them look at it, but then also to describe the salient features of that letter. Say the letter A has two long sticks crossed by one short stick, and then add the sound to that, that is an A, and it starts apple, or it starts for Alex, and the A sound and the A sound. And then add the other piece of it too, of actually tracing the tactile letter, and getting some of that movement and also the texture to kind of reinforce what the child is seeing and touching. And also, if they have the ability, you can help them with building the letters. I know there are a lot of magnets that you can make the letter A, and that actual sense of building it adds some more understanding. I'm going to give you an example of that. So I had a student here that was actually a learner who had a traumatic brain injury later in life, and he had been a reader his whole life. and he did lose the ability to see the difference between letters and to read. And so what we worked with on him were these letters that snapped together. And so he, for example, in this picture, he had a difficult time in discriminating between the R and the P. And it wasn't until we set up the P or the R with the legs slid underneath it so it looked like a P, and he physically pulled that bottom of that R out. That movement and that understanding just snapped it to him, and he totally understood the difference then. And then we put those side by side. He was able to choose which were the P's and which were the R's. So just, you never know how adding just some different multisensory activities can really cement what it is that they're learning. Okay, so here's the big but learners with CVI struggle with too much sensory input. We definitely know that through experience, and the literature it has shown that to be true. So the big question is, what do we do about that? Okay, so I ask you to consider using diagnostic teaching methods. So diagnostic teaching involves a constant interplay between assessment and instruction, and this evaluates the learning abilities of the child and also the teaching effectiveness of us. So we need to determine, one, is the child learning to look? Is that what this activity about? Two, does he need to explore through his other senses in order to learn more and in different ways? And three, are they looking to learn? Have they moved past just using it as a visual, something that's visually interesting, and have they actually started to learn by what they're looking at? So I've got a series of 3 photos here, and I'm kind of looking at exactly what I just talked about, becoming an active observer. So as you're going through activities, these photos captured all 3 within just a few moments. So the child was learning to look. In the photo on the left, she's looking at a light box that has just a mixture of circles with yellow and blue and red. And the child was learning to look as the teacher turned the light brighter and dimmer and would actually physically move the overlay that drew the child's visual attention to that activity. And next, the teacher taps on the overlay of the red circle and says the word circle. And then she hands the child a red circle to hold and says circle again. And then the third, the teacher asked the child to find the red circle. And you can see that the child is actually fixating on the circles at that moment, where before she was just looking at the whole of it. So that's just an example of an activity where you're actually combining different sensory activities at one time. Okay. So when do we focus on learning to look? So we have learned the term brain plasticity, which is, we all know, is the ability for the brain to keep growing and to make more connections. And we definitely want to increase the use of vision and visual understanding. And so basically, how do we do that? Okay, we watch for subtle responses. And I know those of you that have been working with kids for quite a while will know this as well. But sometimes it's very difficult to see, but you really have to pay attention. Sometimes the visual response will be the eyes opening suddenly as something interesting is being presented. They could physically turn towards the stimulus, what it is that you want them to look at. Another one that sometimes we miss is becoming very still. And that's something that takes, a quiet environment when you're actually watching the child, what their reaction is. And if you present something to them, and they will just stop doing what they were doing, whether it was wiggling or babbling or trying to roll or whatever it was. And that stillness can indicate that they now are aware that something visually is in their field. Um, Another thing is they could actually reach for it. So these very small, subtle responses, that is when we know that the child is paying attention to what it is that we're showing them. Okay, we also have to be aware, very aware of visual fatigue, because we know that that happens when kids are learning to look. It's very tiring for them. Some of these signs can be closing or covering the eyes. The child could physically look away. They could actually cry and become uncomfortable. Some more subtle ones that I've seen, especially in very young children, could be excessive yawning, where they're just that's their reaction, and you should be aware of that to make sure that you are not exhausting the child and that they're becoming overly tired. And I've also seen kids that will start to hiccup, like that was their symbol to me was, okay, I've had enough of of what it is that we're doing visually. Okay, so when there's visual fatigue, we don't want to just give up and stop the learning, but we can assess the situation and then turn a corner, starting to utilize the other senses so that we continue what we're working on. Okay, so why do we do this? Well, basically because learning should not stop while we are waiting for the child's vision to catch up. We know that kids with CVI definitely have the ability to improve their vision. That's why CVI is so exciting to work with, I believe, because we know we can make a difference. But we also need to understand the child's capabilities and preferences for all of the learning that's taking place. So how do we do this? Okay, we work in the zone of proximal development. This is when optimal, learning zone as what the child can do with assistance. So where the child is at, right? You give them a little bit of assistance, that's where you want to start the learning, what they can almost do. So you want to scaffold the progress with just the right amount of support, not spending time on things that they can already do, and not frustrating them with tasks that are too difficult. You need to be conscious of adjusting the environment one variable at a time, almost kind of in a scientific experiment type of way, when you're decreasing the complexity and when you're increasing the complexity. So I wanted to take a look at this through different visual tasks. Okay, so here is just two different pictures of the light box. The first one, and it may even be that you don't have any black on the light box screen, but you're looking at one thing at a time. So you want to see if the child can attend to the light box. And if they can attend to the white on the light box, you want to make that visual target smaller. So the picture on the left is a little bit smaller, and the picture on the right is focusing on a smaller target to see if they can focus their attention on that. Okay, then you want to add a variable. So you add color. This one, it actually looks more yellow or orange, but it was actually the red overlay. So you add that. And if the child is still attentive to that and still aware of it, then you can go ahead and add another variable. Okay, so here we're adding a circle in front of it. So you actually have three things that the child's seeing there. They're seeing the black outline, they're seeing the white outline, and they're seeing the circle. Now, this may be way too much for some kids, and it may be at the right level for them to be challenged. And then you would move forward and you would actually add the other sensory piece, which would be that circle in the middle is actually a red plexiglass circle that you can have the child reach for and remove, or you can assist them to remove, and then they're actually holding something, and you can talk about the circle, you can say the circle, they can touch the circle, they can mouth the circle, they can do all these different ways to learn about that circle. Okay, you can increase the number of shapes. The screen on the left has a blue circle and a red circle, and then it's a little hard to see, but the screen on the right has a yellow circle in there as well. So if they lose their visual attention and interest on the left screen, you would stop there and maybe remove one of those shapes. But if they're interested in the activity and you want to see if they can actually be aware of 3 items on the screen, you can add that other. And now the next slide, we're actually adding a whole lot of complexity to it. That is the black and white checked screen behind the circles. So as you see, we want to see in the first one, can they do that with 1 circle? And then I would do 2 circles and then eventually do the 3 circles. And again, if it's too much for the child, then you would remove it. If they're comfortable with what you've presented, then try adding a sensory piece to that. As I said, either tapping it or having them reach for it or hold it. And then thirdly, you might challenge them and ask them to use their vision to learn. And that would be to look, find the red circle. And then you're tying all 3 of those activities together. Okay, so here in this picture, I just kind of wanted you to see what it is that you can observe in this learner. So in the photo on the left, this young man is looking at 1 white peg in the increasing complexity pegboard. And so he is definitely focused on that. And then in the second photo, you can see that he is looking at a whole row of 5 white pegs in the increasing complexity pegboard, and his little hand on the right, I don't know if you can tell, but is desperately trying to reach for those pegs so that he can hold them, and he can mouth them, and he can bang them, and he can do different things to explore with them. So as tolerated, I would do a hand underhand assist so that he can reach one of those pegs and hopefully pull it out and to interact with it. And then the picture on the right is actually that little guy, and we asked him to find the white pegs. And so you can see that his head has turned to the left, because the white are his preferred, but he did turn to look at them. So you know that he can tell the difference between the ones on the right and the ones on the left. So there he's learning to use his vision, or learning through using his vision. Okay, I left all of my references and resources on here in case you would be interested in looking at those. And then I just wanted to thank you for listening. This webinar is going to join others on the ALEX program website, which the link is right there. And if we have quite a few things that we're adding regularly onto the website, and we will post webinars in time prior to them coming out, and we hope that you join us again. This is being recorded so that you will be able to share it with someone else if you would like to, or you'd be able to rewatch it if there was something that you wanted to revisit. So I would like to thank you again for joining me, and I hope to see you soon.